Good afternoon and welcome to the April 28, 2022 meeting of the Board of Library Trustees. Today we're back to having a hybrid meeting so people can participate either in person in the council chambers or virtually through Zoom. And I'd like to ask Francesca to provide a little bit more detail on how the public can participate in the meeting today.
Yes, if you are not joining us in person here in the council chamber, there are two ways to virtually participate in this meeting. You may join directly on Zoom Gov from your computer or mobile device, or you may call into the Zoom meeting. To join the meeting on Zoom, use the link or phone number on the agenda at isearchmonterey.org. To call in by telephone, dial toll-free 833-568-8864, enter meeting ID 161-352-8864, followed by the pound sign. If prompted to enter a participant ID, press pound. Detailed instructions on using Zoom are available at monterey.org/public meetings. To make a public comment, click on the raise hand button in the Zoom toolbar. If you called in by phone, you will raise your hand by dialing *9 and unmute yourself when called upon by dialing *6. Attendees will be muted until it is your turn to speak. Today's meeting is also streamed live on the city's YouTube account at youtube.com/City of Monterey with an approximate 10-second delay, and on Comcast channel 25 with up to a 90-second delay. If you plan to make a public comment, join the meeting using Zoom or by telephone and ensure you join in time to accommodate the delay. As always, we look forward to receiving your public comment.
Thank you very much, Francesca. Could you now call the roll, please?
Yes, Vice Chair Felguth.
Present.
Trustee Moreau.
Here.
Eddie.
Here.
Trustee Joshi. It's not yet here. Chair Thompson.
I'm here, and so we have 4 trustees here, and I would just note that Trustee Joshi has been having some technical problems and was here with us earlier, and I expect he'll join us again soon. We also are having some feedback issues. And Bob, you had a comment?
I hear the feedback too, but only when you're talking.
Interesting.
Because when Francesca was talking to me, there were no problems.
Interesting.
Just to see if that helps, give us a hint on what to do.
Yes. Okay. And I would note that Trustee Joshi has now joined us. You missed the roll call, but you were only by about 30 seconds. You're good, Harish. And Francesca or Amp, if you have any suggestions on how to deal with the feedback, that if it seems to be coming from my direction, I don't have any other TV on or anything like that. If no suggestions at this point, I'll go ahead and proceed.
By the way, yeah.
Francesca, I'm sorry, did you say something?
Oh, so, Amp will try to turn down the speakers in the council chamber to see if that makes a difference.
Okay, good idea. Very good. Okay, the next item on our agenda is our consent calendar, which is items 1 through 3, with item 1 being the minutes of the March 24 meeting. Item 2 being a request to appropriate $40,000 in donated funds. And item 3 being a second reading and adoption of revisions to Library Board Policies 145 and 425. And I know on item number 3 that Marcia and Inga have identified some typos that we probably should correct. And I think we can probably leave it on the consent calendar, consent agenda. But if Inga, if you could go ahead and run through those corrections that we'd like to make to the policies 145 and 425.
I thought I would share my screen to walk you through the changes. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Only partly.
Okay. I'm new to sharing my screen, so
I think it's good.
I'm not sure what I need to do.
Works for me.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
Are you
So
going to talk about changes that are on the thing? in
Yeah.
blue or changes to what we received in our packet?
So in your packet that we found after the packet went out, there were a few typos that are in your packet. So if you look, for instance, on packet page 13, on packet page 13, let's see, where is it? Okay, in item number 1, you'll see how it says be mailed or immediately, right? Because we eliminated the word faxed. And so basically the best way to correct that would be to place the word mail and the word or with sent. So be sent immediately is the proposed change there. And then on the next policy, which would take us to packet page 15. So let's see, one more page down. We removed the title archivist. See down at the bottom here under requirements for reproduction of archival materials, 1 period. So we say archivist, but there was the word the in front of the word archivist. So if we don't remove this word the here, then it reads with the designated staff. And that's not as elegant as simply taking the out. Well, so we propose taking the out, so it would read with designated staff. And then one more thing is a comma that should have been removed, and that's on page 16. So down here under staff responsibility, item number 2, it says personal scanners, comma, and personal photocopiers. So that comma is really not needed. So we suggest removing that comma as well. So those were the changes. Those were the typos that we found.
Okay, thank you, Inga. Any of the trustees have questions on those particular changes? Bob?
I like all I noticed the changes too. I would just use the word delivered rather than sent in the first one of the 3. Since it's a word choice rather than just a typo, I would say instead of be sent immediately, I would say delivered immediately, but that's no biggie.
I think that would be fine. What do you think, Inga?
Sure.
It seems, I never heard, you don't usually hear about email being delivered, though. It
Right.
seems awkward if it was email. I mean, delivered is mail, but nobody really delivers an email. So that's why sent, I think, covers both of those, if that was your intent.
That was my intent, because the 2 ways that we deliver currently would be mailing through the US Postal Service or emailing.
That's why I thought sent better. Delivered to me is, somebody knocks on your door and delivers it.
Well, that's a good point. Sent is a little more generic, perhaps.
That's what I thought.
Okay,
Okay, let's leave it with sent then. I think we have a consensus on that. Are there any other questions about the proposed changes that Inga just went through? If not, are there any questions about any of the other items on the consent, items 1 or 2?
Yeah, I have one.
Go ahead, Marcia.
In the minutes on packet page 7, under Trustee Joshi's remarks, it says he complimented the staff who created the creative and entertaining patron mobile app. Well, the staff didn't create the mobile app. It was the video teaching people how to use the mobile app. Because I remember you saying the video on the website is great. So this sounds like the staff created the mobile app, which I don't think that they did.
So perhaps we can add the word video after mobile app.
Yeah, the mobile app video I think is good. Or the video explaining the mobile app or something like that.
I didn't say creative, I said informative, but that's a minor thing.
Well, as long as we're changing it, why don't we change that too?
All right.
Who
Creative
created,
and informative, yeah.
Okay, so it would read now, who created an informative patron mobile app video? Is that everybody okay with that?
Yes, yes. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions about the items 1, 2, or 3? Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on items 1, 2, or 3?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand, or if you are connected by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Very good. Any other trustee discussion or questions about any of the items on the consent agenda? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with the revisions noted to item number 3.
So move.
Second,
Jennifer moved and Marcia seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Vice Chair Fralguth,
Yes.
Trustee Joshi,
Yes,
Trustee Moreau,
yes,
Trustee Petty,
Yes,
and Chair Thompson.
Yes, motion approved unanimously. Next item on our agenda is the public comment section of the agenda, which is an opportunity for a member of the public to speak on any item that is not on our agenda tonight. Could you see if there's any members of the public that wish to speak to the board, Francesca?
Yes, and always we encourage members of the public to join our meeting via Zoom. You will be connected live in real time to the meeting. To make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand, or if you are connected by phone, dial *9. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Francesca. So the next item on our agenda is the public appearance section of the agenda, which is items 4 through 9. And we'll start with item 4, which is receive a report from the Ad hoc Library Director Recruitment Committee and the Executive Recruiter, and provide direction regarding the Library Director recruitment and selection process. And I'll make a brief introduction on this item, and then I'd like to ask Pam Derby, the Executive Recruiter for our Library Director Recruitment, to give us an update, and we can have any additional comments from Marcia or Inga and questions from the trustees. So at our last board meeting in March, we were in the midst of finalizing the RFP process and negotiating a contract with CPS HR Consulting. And I'm very pleased that we were successful in completing that process and signing an agreement with them on April 7th, I believe it was. And since then, they have been actively working on the project. And I think we're very fortunate to have this firm working with us. Pam Derby, has a number of years of experience doing all kinds of recruitments, including library director recruitments, but also many others. And also working closely with her will be a library consultant, Susan Heldreth, who is very widely known in library circles, and I think will be very helpful in recruiting people and also helping screen the candidates. So we're very pleased to have them working with us. And with that, I'd like to ask Pam to give us a bit of an update on where we're at with the project. And I should note that yesterday, she did email to all the trustees the updated work plan schedule and also the brochure that they've been working on. And also our recruitment committee worked closely with her and her staff on that, as well as Inga and Nat. And we feel very comfortable with that brochure at this point. So with that, Pam, could you take it away?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. As the Chair mentioned, we've been working on this for the last couple of weeks or so. We've spoken with all of the board and a whole list of stakeholders that the board provided, the Recruitment Committee provided to talk to them about what they're looking for. We've spoken with the city manager, assistant city manager as well. And I think we've come up with an ideal candidate profile that everyone is comfortable with. The first thing I'm going to do is share my screen and share the work plan quickly, just so we can walk through it. As we've done the planning and preparation piece, we've done the stakeholder engagement piece. We're now at the recruitment materials piece, which we did provide a PDF yesterday to the rest of the board that the Recruitment Committee and Director Waite and Assistant City Manager, and I'm sorry, I can't pronounce his last name. I have never heard anyone mention it, but Nat, all had input into and have have edited. I have to apologize. I have the flu, so I'm a little tongue-tied today. And so the goal is to have everyone approve that today, and then we will start posting on Monday, May 1st. It'll go up on all the websites. We do have a very large database of individuals that it will be sent to, and then it will we'll start our active outreach, touching base with people. Susan will be contacting her entire network of individuals to encourage them to apply, but we'll be focused on those individuals that also that bring the attributes that you've all indicated that you're looking for. It will close on May 31st, so we will be advertising for the entire month of May. You do have a meeting on May 26th where we'll give an update, if so desired, to let you know how we're doing. But we'll do, after that final filing date, we'll be doing screening interviews with those candidates that meet the minimum qualifications. Typically, that's about 10 to 12 candidates. The week of June 6th, we'll be providing a client report. We'll be meeting with the Recruitment Committee and either the city manager and the assistant city manager to review our recommendations for those candidates that should move forward. Usually that's about 6 or 7 candidates. And then the week of 6/13, we have slated to do semifinalist interviews. So it'd be a panel interview with the Recruitment Committee, the assistant city manager or city manager, to then determine a top probably 3 finalists. And at that point, then we would do reference and background checks. We will have done media checks previously on all of the candidates we screen, but we will do the deep dive reference checks at that point. A background check, if it includes criminal, we cannot conduct until there's a job offer on the table per California law, but we can do credit and education verification, etc., but we cannot do a criminal check at that point. You do have a library meeting on the 23rd of June where we could give a possible update. There is the ALA conference. I believe it's the ALA conference is going on the week of the 20th. And so we have pushed out the board's interviews until either the 28th, 29th, or 30th. And the board would then be interviewing those finalist candidates and hopefully identifying a candidate. The Recruitment Committee has talked about gathering during that time between the semifinalist and finalist interviews. We'll be gathering writing samples from those individuals, and they'll also then be preparing a presentation for the final interview with the board. At that point, when the candidate has been selected, we typically are available to help with negotiations, etc. You do have a flat salary schedule in Monterey for different positions, and so the negotiation is probably more around PTO and things of that nature. But anything else I can share on this? I know I went through it very quickly, but I know you've all had the opportunity to review it.
Pam, I had 2 questions, but I see Bob has a question. Bob, why don't you go first?
Okay, thank you. On the last page of the time schedule there, where the board is interviewing the finalists, and it splits the interview day into 2 halves, ending with the board interviewing the candidates in the afternoon. And in the morning, it talks about, it says Friends and the Foundation. I think that's a typo. Friends and Foundation is the name of a singular body. It's not Friends and then another one called the Foundation. It's Friends and Foundation that is just one. But it also says that department heads will be interviewing the candidates for our library director. And I find that very, very strange. So I'm wondering if somebody can explain who the department heads are that would be interviewing along with officers of Friends and Foundation and so forth.
I can comment on that. So we've hired several department heads recently, and department heads are part of the city's executive team. We meet twice a week to discuss issues of mutual concern, as well as city council meetings. And so we're considered a team. Most of those folks report to the city manager, and some of us do not, such as the city attorney and myself, and we're kind of more advisory. But anyway, we discuss matters quite frequently. So during the recruitment for our finance director, for instance, I had the opportunity to interview that candidate along with my fellow department heads. And when we interviewed candidates for the assistant city manager, I also participated in that interview, met the candidates, and then gave my feedback to the city manager afterwards, along with my colleagues. So that's the concept, is that other department heads, and in particular, we were thinking the Parks and Recreation department head, because the library works closely with Parks and Recreation, and also Finance and HR. Those would be good department heads to meet the finalist candidates and then give feedback on them.
Yeah, if I could also add to that, probably either the city manager or the assistant city manager would be involved, either in that interview or one of the others. And we might even have a library director or a city manager from another city, perhaps. I mean, we haven't really gotten into the detail of it, but I think the important thing is to emphasize that whatever advice they have is purely advice to the library board, that the library board would make the final decision, and it would just be a matter of providing input, not making a decision. But that's, and maybe Pam or Marcia, if you wanted to add to that response.
If I could just add one more thing. Thank you, Jim. So when the city of Pacific Grove was interviewing for their new library director, I sat in on a panel for that as well. And then I gave my feedback to the person that position reports to, who happens to be their city manager, because our libraries work so closely with one another. And I really appreciated that opportunity to provide feedback. So that would be the other library director, outside library director we might include. Thanks.
Anything else you'd like to add, Pam or Marcia?
No, I don't think so. I know that we buy into the team concept, and the fact that we get to hear their input, I think is very helpful for our own decision making.
And this is a very typical process. We utilize this in Berkeley. We utilized it for Marin County. And for many other positions in department heads as well, because they do work so closely together. So this is a process we've used many times.
Did you have other questions, Bob?
No.
One thing I'd like to highlight, and we could come back to this later perhaps, but we did show for the semi-finalist interviews that we could in fact have the entire board do that, but it would take quite a bit of time. And so we've kind of tentatively recommended that only the recruitment committee be involved in that interview of maybe 5 to 7 candidates, because that would take some 6 to 8 hours that week. But that's optional. If the board strongly wanted to be involved in that second level of interviews, the semi-finalist interviews, that could be arranged. So I wanted to explicitly raise that as an issue. We definitely feel like the entire board, if at all possible, should be involved in the final interviews, the ones that we're thinking of for June 28, 29, or 30. But we think it's kind of optional for the semifinalist interviews. And I think quite often, according to Pam's advice, quite often it would not be the entire board that would be involved in that level of interview. But I did wanted to highlight that as an option, and we can come back to that later after Pam finishes her update. But the other question that I had, Pam, is that I know under the stakeholder engagement, there was an online survey that we had discussed, and I've kind of lost track of that. Could you update us on that?
Yes, I'll send you all a link tomorrow to the tentative survey. We'd been so focused on getting the brochure ready to go that we had kind of let that go to the wayside for the moment. We had a pretty quick, tight turnaround. So I will send you all a link that you can see, and then Inga will be sending it out to the rest of the staff that we haven't spoken to the Friends Foundation, those individuals, and those individuals that probably receive agendas, et cetera, to encourage them. And certainly we can have a link on the library's website that people can ascertain there to participate. And we'll have it up for the length of the recruitment. And we indicate that it's, we're getting this information just to help us when we're putting questions together and we're vetting candidates to see if they bring the qualities that individuals are looking for. So it's just an additional layer of feedback for the board. And it's, we don't have the time to speak with everyone, obviously. And we do think there are staff members that may be part-time or things that would like to weigh in as well.
Yeah, and on that, Inga, perhaps it would make sense to include that in the city's website under Have Your Say Monterey. Might be a nice place to have a link to that as well. Just a suggestion. Okay, if no other questions, Marcia.
No, I was just going to say, perhaps you, at some point, you could share the findings with the board so that we're, as we're screening, we can have a good sense of what the public feels like they'd like to see. It would be useful information for us as well as putting for you.
Yeah, we do put together an engagement report that will give high levels of all of the conversations we've had, and then it will give all of the results from the survey as well.
Great.
And we'll do that prior to you meeting with candidates.
Perfect, thank you.
Good. Okay, if nothing else on that part, Pam, did you want to go ahead and talk about the brochure?
Yes, I'll go ahead and share that. The board did receive the PDF of the brochure yesterday. As the chair mentioned, I've been working very closely with the Recruitment Committee, with the Assistant City Manager, and with Ms. Waite to produce this brochure. We think that it's very representative. The library obviously provided us with the photos. This will be in a flip book format, so on our website. So it's like getting your Target ad on Sunday where people can click. We find that most people, everyone's electronically tethered these days. And so we find that doing these things electronically is really presents the position in the best light. It'll be shared on LinkedIn, obviously, and all of our LinkedIn channels. And we'll be sending this to, as I mentioned, probably it says 500, but I think it's more around 1,000 individuals. And
Pam, if I could interrupt for just a moment. In terms of the flip book, as I understand it, for example, what we're showing is page 1 here would be on one page, and then it would be 2 pages together. So like, for example,
correct.
Some of them look a little weird if you look at it just as a single page, but if you envision it as 2 pages side by side, then it works much better graphically. So I just wanted to, is that the way it works?
That's the way it works. So it works together graphically with those the cover, but then when you click, then you have pages 2 and 3 together, and then 3 and 4, and 4, then 4 and 5. So yes. And I hope I'm not making anyone seasick. I know you've had the opportunity to look at it, but I was just flipping through it quickly. And so we have all the library priorities and strategic initiatives that you've adopted. It talks about the library. It talks about some of the challenges that this individual is going to face. And then we talk about the ideal candidate. And this language is language. These are things that all of the 5 of you shared with me that we have put in to talk about exactly what you're looking for in this person. We also share the compensation, the benefits, et cetera. And then the application deadline, as we discussed, is Tuesday, May 31st. We're doing it on Tuesday because Monday is, that's the last day of the month, and it's also the day after the Memorial Day weekend. And both Susan and I are listed as contact so that people can get in touch with us. But we're very happy with the way it turned out. And that will start posting on Monday.
Good. On that piece of the presentation, any trustee questions or comments? Bob?
A comment and then a couple of questions. My comment is that it looks very, very good. And it reminds me of the booklet that G4 put together for us when they were making their proposal for doing our the work for which we hired them, where they were flipped open and then you had the 2 pages and not just the cover. And so I like the looks of that. One question is, Pam, you said that Monterey Library gave you the pictures, the photos that we see in here. Well, I was bothered by the fact that most of them show people that aren't connected to the library anymore. And in particular, I was looking at the page 2 where there's a woman maybe holding her toddler, talking to a librarian who has looks like a purple dress on, maybe. Page 2. I have no clue who that person is. Some of the others I've seen, but they're long gone. But I have no idea who that person is. And I was wondering if there's a way we could use more up-to-date pictures.
So we used to have a professional photographer come and do a photo day every year. And since we've been closed due to the pandemic and since our budget had been so significantly reduced, we haven't had a photo shoot of that caliber. That's Marilyn in that nice purple suit. She used to be one of our bookmobile drivers, and now she's at the Prunedale branch of the county library. So we didn't really have that caliber of photos to share, and also photos that show a lot of activity because, of course, pre-pandemic, we had a huge level of activity. Since the pandemic, it's been quiet. So we used some old photographs.
Well, in that case, I mean, did you say her name was Marilyn?
Yes.
I mean,
Is that right, Kim? Kim's kind of making a face. I know it begins with M. Yeah, Marilyn. Great.
I mean, she hasn't been at the library for probably at least 10 years because I've been on the board.
No, it's been just about 2 years. She was, she looks like a professional librarian, but she was a library assistant to RPT. And she was very interesting. She had a background in ocean sciences and so was able to introduce some STEM programming when she drove the bookmobile for us.
Okay.
I personally don't have any real reservations about the pictures having to be current staff. I mean, they're representative of our staff and of things happening at the library. I think that's what's important.
Okay, my second question relates to, as I leaf through here, page 9, or it's the next to the last page, in the compensation and benefits section, where it describes the retirement benefits. I found that confusing because it says that 2.7%, et cetera, is for current employees or new employees who are hired but before January 2013. So I'm saying, well, what if you were hired in 2022? That's not before 2013, and you're not a current employee. So what benefit equation would apply to the new director who's going to be hired in 2022?
Yeah, under CalPERS law, under something called PEPRA, that was approved as a reform of the
Right there, yeah.
as a reform back a number of years ago. They provided a differentiation for who would be able to continue to have the retirement benefits that were accruing at that time versus new employees that would get the 2% at 62. And they extended that as kind of a reciprocal thing. And it is rather complicated, and that's why it sounds complicated, is because it is. But for example, if someone is working for another city in California, they come to Monterey with less than a 6-month break, then they can continue to have the enhanced benefits. Whereas if they were not employed anywhere in California, or if it's been longer than 6 months since they've been employed, then they would go to the new, much more limited retirement benefit. So it is rather complicated, and we could make it longer and a little more complicated, but more clear. But I think most employees that would be concerned about that kind of understand how PREPA works, and I think they would understand what that means, even though it's not obvious to the general public. I don't know, maybe you can add to that, Pam, or Inga.
I checked on that to make sure that that's how we list the retirement benefit on our other brochures, because I wondered why we wouldn't put the 2% at 62 first. But Jim is right that, well, first of all, this is how we list it on our other brochures. And also an employee who's currently working for California under CalPERS would have the possibility of coming in at that higher rate. So that's how it's sort of standard way of listing it.
But what if a person is working in California, but not with CalPERS as their retirement program?
Then they
What
would come
will
in
apply
at
to them?
2% at 62.
Yeah, they would not get the enhanced benefit. They would get.
In other words, if I came from a library and I wasn't in CalPERS, but it was a California library or a Pennsylvania library or a Texas library, it wouldn't make any difference. If I wasn't involved already in CalPERS, then I would get something that's not on this page.
No, you would get what, the 2% at 62 that's mentioned about halfway through the section?
Oh, okay. Well, then it says CalPERS retirement formula for new employees who do not meet the above criteria is that 2%. And then in the third line, it says that the 2.7 is for new employees. I don't know, I'm just, maybe not having ever worked under CalPERS in my life, it's just confusing to me, but maybe it won't be to everybody else who applies. It seems like a little double talk.
Yeah, the whole PEPRA law that applies statewide, it's not just to us, it applies statewide to all CalPERS employers and employees, is quite complicated. This actually is a relatively simple description of it, in my opinion. I've seen much more convoluted and complicated ones, and I don't know that we really want to fill the brochure with that level of detail. We could, but I personally wouldn't recommend it, because the people that are affected by this would already understand pretty much how it works.
Okay.
Or they would ask. When they get to that level, they can.
Okay. Yeah, I was just putting myself in the position of somebody that has not been covered by CalPERS as a retirement program, and reading that and saying, what the heck? And but so I guess I agree with Inga that maybe the thing that says new employees not previously involved in CalPERS should be the beginning of that paragraph. And then, but if you have been, then you get to keep the 2.7. That shifting of half of the paragraph above the other would have made it clearer for me. And I guess, like I said, I was coming from years and years of work in education, never during which was I involved with CalPERS. So that's why it wasn't, something I was already familiar with.
I would say that just about every person who has worked for a public library in California will be a CalPERS recipient.
Oh.
And so it would just be people from out of state, and there might be a few libraries that aren't under CalPERS, but if you're a public library, most likely you're CalPERS.
Okay.
And because of that, and I think, while we don't know who the candidates may be, and of course we may have internal candidates as well, but I think, since my guess is the most likely candidates will be from a California library, that putting our best foot forward is starting off with the 2.7 at 55, which is a much better retirement program from the employee's perspective than the 2 at 62. So if we start off with the 2 at 62, we're kind of starting off from the employee perspective, from a negative perspective. So that's why, to me, it makes sense to start off with a more positive rather than starting off with a more negative. But that's just my opinion. Any other comments on this?
This is Pam. I do think that we should describe it the way the city describes it. This is a city benefit, and this is the way it's described in all of their brochures. And so and people, as the chair and Ms. Wade have mentioned, this is something that most librarians in California, if they've been in a county that has their own system, possibly they're not in PERS yet, but they still understand reciprocity and outside of California, the reality is most states do have some type of public employee retirement system, and so they're familiar.
Did you want to discuss it further, Bob, or are you okay?
No, it was mostly, to be honest, for clarifying it for me, because I always have worked in the private world, not in the public world, for retirement is concerned.
Yeah. Well, when they did the PEPRA PERS Retirement Reform Act a number of years ago, to kind of I like to use the word grandparent people in rather than grandfather, but it's the same idea. To do that sort of grandparenting required some fairly convoluted methods of doing it to still make it save money and be fair, from various perspectives. So I totally agree that it's confusing. Every time I deal with it, I have to really think hard about how it works. So I don't know that there's a simple way to describe it. Are there other questions about questions or comments about the brochure?
I just wanted to comment before about, I think that the pictures are good representations. It doesn't matter, who, I think to somebody who doesn't work at the library, who the people are, but I think that they're good representations of what goes on in the library and kind of what the library looks like. And that was the effect we were going for. The other thing I just wanted to mention to the rest of the board is that recruitment committee, and after Pam spent a great deal of time on this, we spent a great deal of time on it also. And Nat spent time on it, and Inga spent time on it. And so this really was a group effort, a totally joint effort. And we're really pleased with the way it came out too. That's all.
Okay, good. Jennifer, did you have a question?
Just a quick comment. I really enjoyed the diversity that was shown in the photographs in there. So I commend you on that, because that's really going to give candidates a flavor of what our community is like. So.
Good, thank you. Well, I think we've all had a comment except Harish. Harish, do you have any comment on the brochure?
No, I'm quite happy with it. Looks good.
Very good. Very good. Okay. Well, I think maybe by consensus, we're all okay with the brochure and ready for it to proceed tomorrow then. Any objection to that conclusion? Great. Outstanding. Well, then I did want to come back to a couple of items, but before I do, Pam, did you have anything else you wanted to cover in your update?
I did not.
Okay, good.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
And feel better. Feel
Yeah.
better.
Well, I did want to come back though to the question about the semifinalist interviews and also the dates. I wanted to see again the way it's proposed at the semifinalist interviews, probably 5 to 8 people or something like that, would be conducted by the recruitment committee, basically Marcia and me, with perhaps Hans or Nat sitting in. And wanted to see if other trustees felt strongly that the whole board should do that, or if you're comfortable with the way we have proposed it.
Jim, I just wanted to add that if anybody wants to sit in on, they need to sit in on all of them.
Yeah.
Can't pick one or two and then not, you have to weigh in on all of them, because otherwise it's hard to make a decision if you haven't seen them all. So
Yeah.
I would see them all.
In fact, I'd like to go ahead, Dinga.
remind you that if it's more than 2 trustees, then it becomes a closed session. And then we need to get AMP involved and
Yeah, it becomes a Brown Act meeting and requires formal noticing and having introductory availability to the public to make comments. And it becomes more inefficient, but it can be done.
correct.
Any comments on that issue, Bob?
Not that I am advocating that we all join in on the semifinalist interviews, but what Inga said would only apply if more than 2 of us joined the meeting as participants. If you are not a participant, but basically in the audience as a citizen of the city of Monterey, then we wouldn't have that concern. But I think this is at the level where there are about a dozen, is that right, Pam? And it's whittled down to half of that as a result of this meeting, of these.
No, this would be, so we'll whittle it down. We'll do the dozen interviews, and then the recruitment committee will whittle it down to that 6 or 7, but we are talking about a full day of interviews. In
But this is
addition,
where
I'm
there
sorry.
are like 6 or 7 then?
Correct.
And that gets cut down to maybe 3 for the entire board a couple weeks after that.
Correct.
Yeah, well, I'm very comfortable with the ad hoc committee doing it. Although I will say that anybody who wants to sit in, not as a participant, not as a trustee, can do that. And
Well, except it's a closed session. We'd have to talk to the city attorney. But
this is a closed session?
yeah, the interviews will all be in closed session.
Okay. Because if it's not a closed session, then it's like if a trustee has a conflict of interest, they can stay present as long as they remove themselves from the participant category.
No, this will probably be our last public discussion of this process, because once we get into talking about individual candidates, that will be done in closed session. And I think once it's a closed session, then you don't have audience for that.
Right. Okay. I didn't see the word closed session there, so I wasn't sure. Okay.
Yes, sorry about that.
Just to clarify though, the interviews that of the semifinalists, those would be more like a committee meeting, correct? They won't be noticed in a closed session. What we're
Right,
saying is,
unless there were at least 3 board members involved. That's
Right.
what I was saying. If anybody, in addition to the 2 of us, Marcia and me, want to participate, then it becomes a noticed Brown Act meeting, still in closed session, but we still have to go through the rigmarole and give the public an opportunity to comment prior to the closed session. And so we have to have AMP involved and so on. So it does become more complicated, but it can be done. So Jen or Harish, do you have any strong feelings about the whole board doing that? Or are you okay with the committee doing that?
I'm perfectly okay with the committee doing that. I already have enough commitments on my calendar. I don't need more right now. So
Okay, good.
thank you for the opportunity, but no.
Good. And Harish, are you okay as well?
Just a quick question. Is it just you and Marcia, or are other people outside of the board involved without invoking the Brown Act?
No, the only one that we would probably have would be the city manager or assistant city manager. And again, they would only be providing advice. They wouldn't be making decisions.
Okay.
At least I'm not aware of anyone else that we would likely have. Are you, Marcia or Pam? Other than Pam herself, probably.
Other than Susan and I, correct.
Yeah, the consultants would be involved.
So it would be a decision of the consultants and you 3, I mean, you 2 plus somebody from city manager and in an advisory role that would decide who the finalists are.
Right, but I think it would primarily be Marcia and I's call, with the others providing advice.
I hope so.
Yes, we take input from everybody who's sitting there, and then we get the final say.
Yes. If that's the way it's going to work, I'm 100% behind it.
Thank you for your vote of confidence, Bob.
Yes.
I like to vote early and vote often.
Harish, are you okay with the approach we just talked about?
Yes, that's
Okay, good. Then before we move on, Francesca, could we see if there's any public input on this item?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand, or if you are connected by phone, dial *9. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Okay, any further trustee discussion or comments or questions? Very good. Well, I think that's a strong vote of support for Pam as well as the committee, so we appreciate it. Anything else you'd like to add, Pam?
No, thank you so much for having me, and we're looking forward to working with all of you.
Great,
And
thank you.
feel better.
Thank you very much.
We hope you can get some sleep and drink plenty of fluids.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we
Have a good
will
day.
not be offended if you leave the meeting.
I think I'm going to sign
Yeah.
off now.
Okay, thank you, and
Thank you.
Susan as well. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is item number 5, an update on the annual budget process. But actually, I think I'm going to suggest that we invert items 5 and 6. There isn't really a whole lot in item 5. And I think 6, there's some time sensitivity to that for staff. So if no one objects, I'd like to consider item 6 before item 5. Anybody object to that? If not, let's move to item 6, which is the first reading of proposed revisions to board policies 110, 120, and 430. Would you like to give an intro to that, Inga, or maybe Kim?
Sure. So I'll quickly speak and I'll turn it over to Kim. It did occur to me, Jim, that when I've had a lot of feedback on my computer, I've been told to try turning my volume down. So I don't know if that will help with you if you try turning your volume down. But anyway, so the 3 policies that we're conducting a first reading of are the reference service policy, the library card regulations, and acquisitions of works of art. And since Kim, in her role as library manager, took the lead in revising the reference policy, I wanted to let her comment on the revisions that she's proposing. I'll just quickly say that I think what she had told me is it's mostly just sort of updating the language, getting rid of things like telnet, which is a form of communication or file exchange that we don't use anymore. But and fax, of course, we're not doing fax anymore. But Kim, did you want to say anything specific?
No, you stole my thunder. Essentially, it seems like a really strong policy. It just needed to be updated for timeliness, to remove mentions of faxing or telnet, or it cited referring people for patent searches to an organization that no longer exists. So it essentially was just stuff like that we took care of.
Yeah, and I would say that it's to Doug Holtzman's credit. Doug Holtzman was our former assistant library director and also originally was the head of reference at the Monterey Public Library. He created this policy, and he would be very pleased to know that this is the first time it's being revised in a long time. It's really held up. Yeah, 1998 was the previous that's when it was adopted. It hasn't been revised since then.
Okay, any other comments?
So I will move on to the other 2 policies unless Kim had anything else you want to say about reference. Okay.
No, unless one of the board members had questions about it.
Any questions from trustees? If not, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, so the next policy before you is policy 120. And all we're recommending there is that we remove the language that has to do with organization cards, because we haven't had those in a really long time. The good example that I can think of is when we had one was when, oh, now I can't think of the publisher, darn it. When the publisher at Ryan
Hill.
Yes, McGraw-Hill. They used to have sort of an institutional card. They were a textbook publisher, and their staff used to like to borrow materials as part of their work. But since McGraw-Hill isn't around there anymore, we haven't had institutional cards. The other recommendation that the committee had was to increase the non-resident card fee for people who live outside of California. So just to reiterate, we do not charge Californians because we're part of universal borrowing. But for people who live outside of California, and we are a tourist destination, we charge a 1-month card fee of $5 a month, but that hasn't been updated in a really long time. So we thought we should update that to $10 a month. We don't generate a lot of income from that fee. And just as a reminder, when we increase fees that are included on the city's master fee schedule, this becomes a recommendation that goes to council as part of updating fees in general. So there are a couple of fees that we've approved in previous policies, fee changes, and those will be part of the annual master fee schedule update that goes to council in June. And then the final policy, and then I'll take questions, has to do with the acquisition of works of art. So since that policy was adopted by the board, the city council adopted a resolution about the acquisition of works of art for the city. And so we're updating our board policy to comply with city council policy. And basically the big concept is that since we're a department of the city of Monterey, any artwork that we have is city artwork. We're welcome to put it on our walls, but in order for it to be approved as artwork in the library, it needs to go before the Museums and Cultural Arts Commission, and they determine its suitability as city art based on the collection policy that was approved by city council. So just sort of to keep in mind.
Okay, any trustee questions about any of the 3 policies that Inga and Kim have just outlined?
So it's not a question, but as a member of the policy committee, I just wanted to add, I was very excited about this because I thought that someone could give us a Van Gogh and we could then sell it and build a new wing on the library. But it turns out, as Inga pointed out, that the city has decided that that Van Gogh would belong to the city and not us, and we could hang it on the wall, but we couldn't sell it and use the money to fix up the library.
Unless the donor had a stipulation that if it was sold, that the funds would go accrue to the library, which would then change that situation.
That would be, and that's permissible under this policy, yes?
Yeah. In
Well, that's
fact,
good to know. We'll make sure that we advise the donor who's about to donate the Van Gogh, and they better put that in the gift agreement.
and they could donate it to our endowment fund at the community foundation because through the community foundation, they make it very easy for folks to donate property, cars, artwork. And then also it could be donated to the Friends and Foundation, and they in turn would sell it and give us the proceeds.
That's good.
Okay. Any other comments or questions before we go to public input? Harish.
In the fee-based library cards, is there any exception for the members of the DLI and things like that who are not visiting, so to speak?
So we consider them to be residents when they're based here temporarily. So they're California residents, even though their permanent homes might be out of state or out of the country.
And that would apply to students at Middlebury or CSUMB or elsewhere, foreign students. Even.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good question, Bob.
Question, Inga. You referred to the city, coming up with their own policy about approving and everything, and the use of artwork that's given. Does that include grandparenting in all of the things that we already have? So, for example, we have a lot of historic documents, photos mostly, in the California History Room that we could post. We could have a display. We don't have to go through any rigmarole to get permission to hang those on the wall because we already possess them.
No, so those aren't considered part of the art collection. The art collection is just sculpture, paintings, and so forth. It's not the photographs.
So it's not photographs, which
Correct.
means that somebody could donate a photograph today and it wouldn't fall under these regulations?
Well, so the photographs that we have tend to be historic photographs of
Yeah.
Monterey area. Those
Yeah.
are considered, those are treated the same way a book donation or a manuscript donation
Okay.
would be considered. If somebody wanted to give us, like I have a couple of photographs by some famous photographer of Yosemite. And if someone were to want to give those to us to hang in the library as pieces of art, then that would need to go before the Museums and Cultural Arts Commission.
But if we wanted to have and we've talked about this years ago, when we were working with G4, maybe a revolving display of historic photos that we have in the history room archives. Even additions to that, we could hang on the wall temporarily as part of a display of historic materials.
Correct.
Without worrying about whether it's a piece of art and going through all of okay.
Yes.
Interesting question. Any other questions or comments? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public input on item number 6?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand, or if you are connected by phone, dial *9. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Okay. Any further discussion or questions or comments from trustees? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve. Well, actually, it's just a first reading. No motion is required. Okay, very good. Then we're ready to move on to item 5. But before we do so, I would actually briefly like to go back to item 4 because I forgot to ask about dates for the final interviews. And I wanted to see if people have their calendars handy because we were looking at June 28, 29, or June 30th. And it might be helpful if we could try to nail down a date or 1 or 2 of those dates so that we don't end up scheduling something on top of that later that we'll regret. So if everybody could check their calendars, Marcia.
Are you, is the intent to interview everyone in the same day? If there are 3 candidates, say, to do all 3 in the same day, or 1 a day for 3 days, or what?
They were, Pam was suggesting doing it either in 1 day or
2 days.
Or maybe one afternoon and the following morning.
Okay.
It could go either way. And that's why I think it might be good if we can see if we have 2 consecutive days that everybody's available. It would give us some flexibility there. So I'm free, but all 3 of those days. How about others?
I'm free all of the afternoons, not so much the mornings, but I mean, I can move things around, but the afternoons are preferable. But.
Yeah, it's often good to do it, you know, in consecutive time so that you can kind of remember. So it'd be better to do either all day or morning.
I can make them all work. I can make them all work.
Okay. How about Bob, Harish, and Jen? Harish.
29th is out for me. I've got another appointment for that day, and I'll be going to the Bay Area for that. So it's a bit hard to move it around.
You said the 29th, the entire day?
Correct. Wednesday, huh?
The entire day?
Yes. You have to go to the Bay Area for that. It's all the commute and everything else that's involved.
Okay. How about Bob and Jen?
So Harish is not good on Wednesday, the 29th.
Right.
My only possible conflict is the afternoon of Tuesday, the 28th. And it's too far in advance for me to know for sure, but I know there's a possible conflict that afternoon.
Do you know when you'll know for sure?
I don't, but if I don't know in time for us to schedule us, then the other entity will be worse off.
Okay, thank you. How about you, Jen?
I can make it work. I've got other things scheduled the afternoon of Tuesday and Thursday, but I think I can work around to reschedule those. So I'll try.
So you could probably be available any of those 2
Yeah.
days? Although we're
Yeah.
probably, the 28th is probably out. It sounds like Harish has no flexibility. Is that right, Harish?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay.
Difficult to get appointments there, and
The 29th.
He said
Yeah,
the
it's the
29th, not
29th,
the
Jim.
28th.
I'm sorry,
the
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Wednesday,
Yeah.
the 29th.
29th, I'm sorry, I misspoke. The 29th all day is bad for Harish, and the 28th is bad. The afternoon is probably bad for Bob and for,
Well, maybe, it may be.
okay.
But if is the anticipation we will be interviewing 2 or 3 finalists?
Well, we don't know. It kind of depends on how it falls.
So
Because
Jim,
if it's 2, I was gonna say morning and afternoon would be a way to schedule it maybe, rather than, not much time in between. And how long are you expecting to schedule for each interview? 1 hour, 2 hour? How long?
We haven't really gotten into that level of detail with Pam, but I would guess an
Yeah.
hour. I would guess an hour.
But remember, they're also going to be presenting. So there'll be a interview component and then a presentation component.
so maybe
Yeah.
an hour and a half, maybe 90 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we want some time to talk, I would assume, to talk among ourselves as well. So Jim.
That's why I was thinking morning, afternoon, or 2 different days might be good.
So
Yeah.
Jim, since those are Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, is Friday a possibility also in case we need it? Since that's the same week?
I don't know. That wasn't one that Pam had listed, which made me think they had a conflict, but I don't
Okay.
know. We can, well, while we're at it, let's ask, how about what would that be, June or July 1st? I guess that-
July 1. Maybe it's because it's the beginning of the 4th of July
It's getting
weekend.
near a holiday weekend, yeah.
Stay away from it, yeah.
But still, are people available on Friday, July 1?
Yes,
Yeah.
Right
And
now,
likewise-
but
Everybody
likewise
so
on the
far is okay?
27th.
I'm sorry, Harish?
Likewise on the 27th, that's Monday. Monday's open,
Oh, June 27th, yeah.
right?
Yeah, let's do the whole week here while we're at it. So June 27th, well, let's stay with July 1st. So it sounds like everybody is okay with July 1, but it is a holiday, start of a holiday weekend, so it may not be great for candidates. But except that you prefer not mornings, right, Marcia, still?
Yeah, but I'll do, I mean, I have standing commitments in the morning, but I can miss one or skip one or.
Okay,
something,
okay.
so.
And then going back then to Monday, and again, there may have been reasons that the consultants didn't list Monday or Friday. that I'm-
ALA, the American Library Association
Oh,
conference.
that's right. It's
Yeah.
still, yeah, that's right.
So
'Cause we
that-
think that national AMA conference is in Washington DC, and we don't know, but some candidates may be planning on going because it's a major library director sort of conference. So, yeah, so that's probably, but while we're at it, let's just check. On Monday, June 27th, would that work for everybody?
Yeah.
Bob says yes, Jen says yes, Harish says yes, Marcia says yes. Okay, so we're good with either of those, as well as the 30th. Okay, well, thank you. I'm sorry I didn't bring that up when we were talking about that item, but I realized I had a note there to double check on that, and I realized I'd forgotten to. So my apologies for getting out of order on that. So going back then to item number 5, an update on the annual budget process. Inga, could you give us a little update there?
Sure. And so since we last met, I did have the budget hearing with the city manager, assistant city manager, HR director, assistant HR director, finance director, and assistant finance director. So basically, I just walked them through our submissions because they wanted to make sure they understood what it was that we had submitted as our request. And then this week we had anticipated on Wednesday there was going to be a council study session on the budget, and we thought we might know more about the budget situation. But that meeting was has been rescheduled, and the reason being that the city had been very optimistic and aggressive with their budget schedule. And typically they have that study session in May, but they, when they were planning ahead, they thought, oh, by April, they should have things more nailed down, but they don't have things nailed down. What we do know from the city manager is that if the budget was simply status quo, we would be short by about $600,000. So when you factor in the positions that different departments have requested or other increases departments have requested for various reasons, then that puts the shortages much more significant. So the city manager and assistant city manager and that whole team that I described, they're going to be working a little bit more on what some one-time funding options might be. And Nat has asked to meet with me tomorrow just to go over our budget submission one more time and understand the staffing positions in particular, and you know, what it would look like if it was part-time versus full-time and so forth. And then on May 10th, they have asked, the city manager's office has asked to meet with Jim and Jen, so the chair and the vice chair, to go over the library budget request as well, and to talk about some ideas they have for funding. So at this point, we don't know a whole lot other than it's going to be a very tight budget year next year.
Okay, thank you for that update. Any trustee questions? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public input on item number 5?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand. If you are connected by phone, dial *9. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Thank you, Francesca. Any other discussion or questions or comments?
I just want to ask Inga, the council study session that was supposed to be yesterday, do you have any idea when they're going to reschedule that particular meeting?
Looks like mid-May sometime, but they haven't set the date yet.
Because I was just curious how it would fall in sequence with the other meetings that you mentioned that were going to be just library issues.
Right. So I believe it will be after the meeting that is scheduled for the 10th with Jim and Jen, is my understanding.
Marsha.
Just had a question. Do you have a sense that it's a tight budget year because revenues are low, or it's a tight budget year because the city decided to pay off the pension debt? I mean, was this a decision they made to make the budget tight and reduce everyone, or is it actually that the revenues are lower, or don't you know? Just
I don't know.
My sense of it is that under PERS, they have been, they had a gradual increase in the employer rate that each city has to pay to try to recoup some of the losses that they had. So I think built into the active rate that PERS charges is an increase, which is different than what the council did last year or a few months ago, when revenues were going a bit better than they had expected, and they put some money down for a couple of infrastructure projects and for pension deficits. But I believe I don't know this for a fact, but my impression is that the normal PERS rate is increasing, and that would be a part of the increased costs, as well as potential salary increases that are being negotiated, and health benefit cost increases, and just the general inflation that everybody's experiencing. So I'm guessing it's a variety of factors, but I have not heard that they're talking about putting another chunk of money out of the operating budget for pension deficit reduction. But I know it's a concern that they'd like to address if they could. But
Right,
that's
and
just my general understanding. It's not based on specific knowledge of what's happening.
right, and I think, a couple months ago when they looked at the mid-year budget, they had some one-time end-of-year savings that they allocated towards various projects. But even before the pandemic, the city had projected that there was going to be a shortfall in this year and next year. And so we were in an emergency situation even before the pandemic. So it's not entirely surprising.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or discussion? If not, I don't believe there's any action required for that item. So let's move on to item number 7. I receive an update from the Ad hoc Policy Review Committee. And I'll start on that, and then Marcia and Inga can join in. If you go to packet page 51, we've tried to provide a summary of all the policies that have come before the board recently and that we plan to come before the board in May. Because you've seen a lot of paperwork going with all these proposed changes to the policies, and we thought it'd be helpful to give you a summary of what's already happened and some of the things that are pending. And also kind of near the bottom of page 51, it mentions, I think it's 4 policies that we think probably do need revision, but it's kind of pending other actions, like installing the public printing and having a more formalized justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging policy. And so those things I think will come a little bit later, and there's some of those things have moved further on. And then we list on page 52, 16 policies that we actually are not recommending be changed. So I think we've done a fairly major job of looking through all the policies and updating a number of them. And the one that I particularly wanted to highlight and is actually the subject of most of this report is policy 300, which is the library personnel rules and regulations. And we've spent quite a bit of time on that, and also had a number of discussions with the HR director, the human resources director, city attorney, and city manager's office. And we kind of give a little background there on pages 52 and 53. Because the library has had its own personnel rules for quite some time. But since 2003, they haven't been updated for a variety of reasons. And they're basically a mess at this point, just to be blunt about it. There's a number of major ones that are completely out of date. And it's gotten to the point that the HR department and the city attorney's office aren't even using them because they're basically unusable. And so we originally thought, well, we need to do this massive update of all of these policies. And we actually started on that. And it's an 83-page policy as it is. So it's a massive document to try to update and bring up to speed with the city's current personnel policies. And the HR director and the city attorney and the city manager's office really didn't like the idea of having a separate rule of personnel policies that would apply only to the library, and then another set of personnel policies that applies to the whole rest of the city. And originally we kind of resisted that notion. And we thought there were advantages perhaps to having the library have its own set. But the more we realized how difficult it was going to be to update them, and what a horrible job both the library and the entire city internal services departments have done and not getting the update done in what is it, 19 years now. We finally concluded that if we could make some appropriate changes to the city's personnel rules that acknowledge the unique role of the library director and the board of library trustees, if we could make those changes to the city's personnel rules, that we thought that was a good compromise that would be much more workable in the long term, create a lot less staff work trying to keep 2 different sets of rules in sync, at least as much in sync as they could be and should be. And so we've concluded, after wrestling with this at quite a length, I must say, that made sense. And so we've spent some time with the HR director and the city attorney and the city manager's office coming up with the amendments to the city's Chapter 25 personnel rules that we thought would make it appropriate to work for the library as well as for the rest of the city. And so that's what's highlighted in pages 53 and 54. And it's also incorporated in the draft ordinance for the city council to consider starting on packet page 55. So I won't go through all the details of those, but those are ones to try to emphasize the special role that the library director and the board have under the city's personnel rules. So our recommendation is that we go along with supporting having those changes made to the Chapter 25 that are outlined on pages 53 and 54. And assuming the council approves that, then we would recommend that the board policy 300 be reconsidered for rescinding it basically and replacing it with a short reference to the Chapter 25 city personnel rules. And that we think that would be a much better way to proceed in the future and get us up to date right now, particularly because, with Inga leaving and a new director coming in, we really didn't like the idea of leaving a mess for a new library director to have to fix. And Inga really wanted to fix this before she left, and we were in strong support of that. So that's kind of my overview of it, and we can come back to some of the details of it. But just in general, Marcia and Inga, can you add to my introductory comments?
I just wanted to add that I guess we have to wait now. We had hoped that the city would do their thing so that we could then do our thing and be finished with this. But we're kind of waiting for them to do their thing. And they seem eager to do it. They wanted to get it done, but how many years has it been? 22 years that they've been talking about this?
19.
So, yeah.
19. Well, in fairness, though, I suggested that I wanted to bring this, I thought we should bring this to the library board first before it goes to the city council to make sure that the overall library board is comfortable with the direction that we're agreeing with. So, I mean, if the library board said, Marcia and Jim, you're crazy, we don't think we should go this way, yeah, then that would, then we'd have to rethink everything. But I'm hoping that's not the case. So in fairness to the others, even though they have delayed this for quite some time, I agree with that. At this point, I thought it was important to come to the library board with this issue before it goes to the council. So I asked them to hold off on it for the time being. Other introductory comments? Inga, did you want to add anything? You're muted.
I just want to say how much I appreciate Jim's work on this. Jim has spent countless hours on the details of this. First, he went through our entire 83-page document and updated it so that it was current with the city's policy, but then we realized that wasn't going to be the direction that we're going. And we also researched the history of how we got to our current policy. And so Marcia and Jim put a lot of time into that. So I just want to acknowledge the time that trustees have spent on this, and especially Jim. And then getting the city manager and the city attorney and the HR director to all convene with us, took some work on both of their parts too. So thank you.
Thank you, Inga. In fact, I can't help reminiscing a little bit about my personal history with the city. Some of this history going back in the late 1990s through 2003. I was actually the assistant city manager in the time, and I was actually the one working with library director Paul Simpson at that point, and the city attorney and the HR director at that point in dealing with that issue. So I know how complex it is from having worked on those updates before. And I was kind of disappointed that after I left the city, it kind of all fell apart. So I took some pride that I kept it together for a while, but I realized how difficult it is to keep it together. And so I've reluctantly concluded that it's better to just get away from having our own library personnel rules and trying to fix the current city library rules so that it's also workable from the library's perspective. So anyway, enough introduction, and I'm sorry for that personal anecdote there. Trustee, questions for what we're proposing so far?
Jim, are you just asking for questions about this last issue or about earlier parts of your ad hoc committee report as well?
Either, I think either one. Maybe it's better to do, maybe we should segment it though, because they are quite different. Maybe let's start with everything except for the personnel policies. In other words, all the other summary on pages 50, 51, and the top of 52.
Well, then my question is, in that section on packet page 51, where you identify the second bullet point, wait, where is it? Yeah, well, both of them where it talks about 1, 2, 3, the 4 policies that may be revised that have potential for future revision.
Yeah, near the bottom of page 51, right.
Which I'm trying to read and get the colons identified with the right policy titles and numbers. What's the policy title? What's the policy number that goes with admission fees for certain library cultural programs?
I believe that's 207, isn't it, Inga?
Yes.
So that's 207. Okay. So 130 relates to fines.
Right.
And there's no number related to the diversity, equity, and inclusion?
No, that's not a current board policy. That's actually a separate item on our agenda tonight.
Oh, okay, okay.
So yeah, that's not a policy.
So policy number 130 relates to fines,
Yes.
207 is the fees, and 401 is the collection development.
Exactly.
Correct.
Thank you. And and as far as the other, we talked about the personnel policies. Am I correct in understanding we're not really, well, we're avoiding having 2 separate ones, one for the library and one for the rest of the city, but we are working toward, or our goal is to have those factors that make the library's needs unique incorporated into the city overall personnel policies, so that we do have our differences noted and usable and applicable, but they're just part and parcel of the whole thing. The same way as if Public Works had some that made their needs for personnel administration different, they would be in the cities and just ignored by all the rest of the departments that aren't Public Works. And the same thing here.
Right, and we've tried to call out on pages 53 and the top of 54 what those issues are that are
Exactly. Yeah. Right. No, and I'll just say that having read through those and making sure that they are clearly and definitively noted in the ultimate document that we're talking about, that would be a city document. I think this is a ideal way to head.
good. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. In fact, one thing that I actually meant to highlight, and I forgot to, but if you look at those various dot points on page 53, one of them in particular that I wanted to highlight is the 4th dot point, where we're suggesting to add a provision in the city personnel rules that immediate family members of library trustees basically cannot be the library director. They can have other positions in the city, but they can't be the library director. So, you know, I couldn't ask the board to support appointing my wife as the library director, and I certainly wouldn't. But I did, since that affects each of us personally, I did want to highlight that one in particular. But going back to the leaving the personnel issue aside for just a second, are there other questions or comments about the policies that are summarized on pages 50 and 51? Okay, if not, then let's talk a little further then about the library personnel rules. Bob,
will be closing in 30 minutes.
that was just an announcement in the background that the library is about to close, but the city council chambers are still open if any member of the public wants to come and comment. So any other questions on these library personnel rules? This will be a fairly major change. But as we've discussed, we've decided that we think it's a far superior way to go than what we've been trying to do over the last 20, 30 years.
I just have a general question about HR protocols these days. When they talk about immediate family members, whom does that include?
There is a lengthy definition of that in the personnel rules. I don't happen to recall it off the top. We could stop and get that if you like, but it's fairly, as I recall, it includes brothers, sisters, parents, children, in-laws. It may even include aunts and uncles and nieces and nephews. I forget exactly where it goes, but it's fairly extensive.
But yeah, because initially when somebody says immediate, I think mother, father, and their children. But it includes grandparents and in-laws and maybe aunts and uncles, and therefore maybe cousins. But I was just curious what the general, definition of that is. How far away from you and I do the relatives have to be?
I think we can find that fairly quickly. If you want to hold for a minute, I can.
No, that's okay. Don't take our time now. I could look it up too. I just thought if somebody knew off the top of their head where the end line was, and beyond that, people could be the library director or whatever it is. But no, I can look it up. I was just curious.
Yeah. And again, don't hold me to what I said. That was just kind of my vague recollection of when I read it before. But as I recall, it was fairly extensive. Do you remember?
Yeah, I've got it. I've got it on the screen. It says immediate family member means an individual's spouse, registered domestic partner, parent, step-parent, parent-in-law, child, stepchild, brother, sister, step-brother, and step-sister. The term immediate family member also includes an individual who falls within one of these categories by an adoption or registered domestic partnership.
Okay,
so what about son-in-law, daughter-in-law?
Well, that wasn't in the definition I just read.
Yeah.
So it's not quite as broad as I think I may have suggested include aunts and uncles, and it doesn't appear to have included that. Anyway, so that's the standing definition in the city personnel rules.
Well, that was a city document you read.
Right, from the city personnel rules.
Which are included in chapter 25 of the municipal code.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, if no other questions or comments at this point, Francesca, could you see if there's any public input on item 7?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand, or if connected by phone, dial *9. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Okay, any further discussion or questions about either the overall policies we've been working on, or in particular policy 300, the library personnel rules and regulations? Okay, I don't know that we need a motion on that. I don't know, Inga or Marcia, do you think we need a motion?
I don't think so. We have a plan for the rest of them. I don't think so. It's just
Let me just do it this way. Does anyone object to the approach described regarding policy 300 library personnel rules and regulations, that we would ultimately be coming back to rescind them and replace them with a reference to the city personnel rules after the city personnel rules are adopted along the lines of what's described in this report? Okay, good. I'll take that as a consensus then. Moving on then, item 8, another immediate item. To receive a draft justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging plan. Inga, did you want to introduce that and perhaps Perhaps Francesca, I apologize. I actually turned down my microphone thinking that might solve it, but I'm still hearing the feedback, so I don't know what it is.
Great. So, oh, it looks like Mary Jane wanted to say something.
I just wondered if is there a microphone in the chamber, and does it have necessarily to be live, and could the feedback be coming from there? That's it.
Yeah, perhaps Francesca could check with AMP on that. I don't know. Because we've never had this before with our virtual meetings. It's just this hybrid meeting. It seems to be happening.
And it
And
looks
now
like
you're sounding okay, Jim.
Well, I turned my microphone down quite a bit, but
looked like, Harish, did you want to say something?
It just seemed like it was really coming from AMP, because every time that noise came, you could see it light up, this rectangle. So it seemed like it was something coming from there, a feedback from there, rather than from one of us. So, but that's why I've stayed muted all this time to the extent possible.
Okay. But it looks like they're working on it. Okay. So this item is received draft Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Plan, and provide direction to staff. And this is a plan that, as you remember, the suggestion was made that we include it in our strategic priorities by staff. And then staff, and I should call out Francesca Garibaldi in particular, has been working on this draft. And basically what you have before you is this draft plan where we would focus on 4 areas, namely collections and programming, communication, staff training, and library policies and procedures. And it's sort of a living plan, but then it goes on to say what work would be included in looking at those 4 areas. And then attached to the plan are some definitions. And then also the plan drew heavily from a PLA document, Public Library Association document, which is an attachment as well. And I will have Francesca talk a little bit more about it. And what we're thinking is that we'd like to get some feedback from the board. Then we can take this back and discuss it a little bit more with the staff, and then bring it back to you for adoption would be the hope. Okay, so Francesca, why don't you say a little bit more?
Thank you, Inga. I would only add that you'll see in the document, it says the work is for 2022, and it really is proposed 2022 to 2023. And the idea, of course, the board, please weigh in, was that it would be based on the fiscal year, and that it can then tie into also budgetary items as well. I don't have too much actually to add that Inga already has said, so.
okay, thank you, Francesca, and thank you for all the work you've done on this. I know you've been working on this for a while. Trustee comments or questions, I should say, before we get public input. Marsha.
I had a question about the survey that is included in there. It looks like it came from the Public Library Association. Is that something that's planned to be administered here? Oh, I see. It's only our library. So we complete this survey. Our library completes this survey, and then it gives us information. It gives you information to inform the plan. Is that the way it works? So are you in the process of completing
that survey? The deadline has already passed 2021. This was the first year that they provided the survey for public libraries. To my knowledge, we did not submit the survey.
Okay.
We based a lot of the plan on that survey, with the potential plan that in the future we do take that survey, and so we can add the components that,
So they've been issuing it every year, or they will issue it next year, and then if the library can do the survey. And
correct. 2021 was the first time that
I
this
see.
was issued,
I see.
but they will be continuing to do so.
I see.
Other questions? Well, then before we go to comments, perhaps we can go to public input. Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on this item?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand, or if you are connected by phone, dial *9. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Okay, thank you. Trustee comments and discussion. Marcia.
Oh, I just said, yeah. So the city is also working on a diversity equity plan, and if so, do these mesh together, or is it a joint effort, or how do these two connect? Or
So Nat is taking the lead on the city's initiative, but they are still kind of pulling it together. Right now, they're recruiting for an intern, I believe, to help with it. And so Nat is aware, he's seen earlier drafts and very much wants to keep us in sync and is interested in keeping in sync. So we'll be doing that, but we didn't want our efforts to be held up as we wait for the city to catch up.
I see.
Other questions or comments? Jennifer.
I just was impressed. It seems pretty comprehensive. And I noticed on page 62, it talks about staff training, and I'm hoping maybe we can do some kind of training with the board and fold that in as part of that initiative. But this is very exciting, and kudos to all involved putting it together.
Other comments or questions? Well, I'd like
What
to.
I liked about it was that it makes reference to the fact, I think Francesca just did too, that it's a kind of like a living, working, evolving, work in progress kind of document, and used for planning as much as stating what already exists. I like the feel of that.
Yeah, I do too. And one of the things I wanted to check on, my sense is that Inga and Francesca have not had a chance really to fully vet this with the entire library staff. It's been kind of on a rush to meet this agenda, I think. So I guess that's can you confirm if that's the case, that the rest of the library staff really haven't had much chance to review and comment on this yet?
Correct.
Okay, then, I think it's a very good plan. I think it's much more clear and crisp than, the much earlier draft that we saw, which was just kind of a starting grouping of ideas and resources. So I would suggest that we ask Francesca and Inga to review it more fully with the staff, get any comments that they have and incorporate that as is appropriate, and then bring it back to the board for board approval. And I would make that in the form of a motion.
I'd be happy to second that motion. My dog will quit barking.
Very good. Any discussion on the, well, did we already get public input, Francesca? I believe we did, didn't we?
Yes.
Yes, okay, very good. Any discussion on the motion? If not, Francesca, would you please call the roll?
And Chair Thompson, to clarify, you made the motion and Felgus seconded?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
And
So
what is the motion? Because we're just receiving it according to our agenda here.
I actually
What's the
made a motion. I actually made a motion to refer it to staff for further internal review and then to bring it back to the board for approval.
So you're doing that under the provide direction to staff portion of our
Yes.
agenda item.
so
Any other discussion on the motion? Okay, Francesca, could you call the roll?
Yes, Vice Chair Falguth,
Yes.
Trustee Joshi,
Yes,
Trustee Moreau,
Yes.
Trustee Petty,
Yes,
and Chair Thompson.
Yes. Thank you very much. And again, thank you, Francesca in particular, but all the staff that have been involved in working on this. It's kind of a complex issue for sure. And it seems to me this is a very constructive way of moving forward on it.
Thank you.
I'll
Moving
just
on.
say that it was largely Francesca, so it was a huge lift on her part. And kudos to Francesca for bringing us this far.
Yes.
I would
And-
like to go thanks to Inga as well, who also drafted, of course, the agenda report and helped with the fine tuning.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you both. Moving on then to item number 9, which is to receive the quarterly trust fund report. Inga and Mary Jane.
May I have your attention, please? The library will be closing in 15 minutes. Please bring any items for checkout to the library help desk or self-checking at this time.
Okay, so sorry for another public announcement. As Chair Thompson said, the public is welcome to stay in the chambers and continue to participate, but the library is scheduled to close. So on to our trust fund report, our quarterly trust fund report. This is the 3rd quarter. And basically, you'll see there's some really good numbers in terms of our revenue for quarter 3 and not a whole lot of expenditure. And then we say a little bit on packet pages 84 and 85 are mostly charts. But then we say a little bit about what we've been expending funds on. But then I think that the most important part of this report and what I'd like to give the floor to shortly is Mary Jane to talk about fund development activity this quarter, and then also to talk about the campaign that's just come to a close. So I'm happy to, we could divide it up and say if there are questions about the first part of the report prior to Mary Jane's report, then I could take those and then we can go on to Mary Jane talking about the report starting on packet page 87 and going forward.
Okay, so are any trustee questions on the packet pages 83 through 86? I actually have one question, and maybe it's in here and I missed it, but do we know approximately what the current trust fund balance is?
It's not in the report, so I would have to look that up and let you know.
Okay. Okay, then any other questions anybody has? Marcia?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand the title. So the adjusted budget, I mean, I understand the January through March, but I'm not sure what the adjusted budget means versus the
Or
for the revenue.
right. So for instance, at the beginning of the year, we don't know what our gifts are going to be looking like and what designated gifts are going to be looking like. So we budget fairly low, and then as monies come in and we ask, and you ask that the city council appropriate those funds, then the budget gets adjusted.
Okay, so this is the budget as it is at this moment. Okay.
Yeah, and if I could add, because it kind of threw me for a second too, that the 3rd column where it says fiscal year, I'm pretty sure that's actual to the end of March.
Right. So that is year to date, what has been expended or what has been received.
Okay, so for example, in the very first one, we're predicting at this point 5,400 will come in. So far, 3993 has come in, and so it's 74% of what we have predicted.
Correct.
And the donations, for example, is this happy number. We predicted 95,000, and so far 155,000 have come in. So that's 163% of what we predict. Okay.
Yeah, and that's a good example of where typically with our revenues, we estimate low because we don't want to estimate that we're going to raise much more money than we are able.
Right.
And then usually in expenditures, we try to estimate, the larger amount, and then we tend to underspend.
Okay, any other questions on the first part of the report before we get to Mary Jane's part? If not, why don't we go ahead, Mary Jane?
Sure. Thanks, Inga, and thanks, Jim. Before I start, I'll point out a typo. I feel pretty chuffed that I might have found a typo before Jim Thompson did.
I found it.
But I too busy to point it out. So you'll notice in the second footnote under the chart of funds raised that I compare the quarter that's just ended, quarter 3 of the current year, with quarter 23 of last year. So in fact, the 2 just did not get deleted. Darn it, Jim. And I think we talked at our last meeting about a little bit about chocolate and wine and about MC Gives. So I'll not say anything really at all about those efforts unless someone has questions. About the conclusion of the Monterey Learns campaign, perhaps in addition to reading this straightforward brief report, I would just add that campaigns have a way of focusing the mind and kind of focusing the community's mind and giving a focus to our efforts and a great umbrella. It'll be important in creating the 2022-23 development plan to have some strategies in place and do some thinking about how we maintain as much momentum as possible. I've never known a campaign where there wasn't kind of a little bit of a letdown, a little bit of a plateau. The idea is that with each campaign over a period of time, one builds and the trend definitely goes up, but it's not a straight line. So we'll be putting on our planning hat and thinking about how we can hold on to the gains that we've made, not just in terms of dollars raised, but also I think it was an important step to create the honorary campaign committee and to have the Friends and Foundations inaugural fund development committee under its new structure have something significant to sink its teeth into. So there are experiential benefits that pulled the internal community together, and I hope pulled our broader community together as well, in addition to the funds raised. The funds raised are great. The needs are so enormous that I try not to think about. I try not to think about them in the same paragraph. There's so much more to be done in the future. Just about the staffing infrastructure that has been changing a little bit and that I've been involved in, I'll say a couple of three remarks. One is that I'm continuing to spend time with Ann Jacobson, who's so bright and so diligent and a real pleasure to work with. She and I had a nice session today, and she's it's for a 10-hour-a-week position, 2 days a week, to learn a whole new realm, not really having any experience to speak of with fundraising before or with this kind of database. I'm really glad that she's keeping her spirits up and not getting discouraged. So it's a lot of complexity. I'm surprised. So that I'm really encouraged about that. And the communication specialist who's just started, Ilana Enton, I'm really optimistic and excited about having somebody on board who has truly professional credentials in the marketing and communications world, and seems to have a ton of creativity, and just does some sophisticated, high caliber thinking about how we present ourselves to the outside world. So I'm really glad that Inga was able to make that hire. There's some Venn diagram overlap with fund development, but marketing and communications is really a different animal. And last but not least, I wanted to say something about in appreciation for Francesca. As part of training and orienting Anne, I've been going through folders, some of which I realized were called like keep resources. I had shoved things in folders that when I've unpacked them in order to train Anne, I realized so many roads lead back to Francesca over the 2.5 years that I have worked here. And I've been grateful all along. I've been super grateful all along. But seeing this whole kind of oeuvre of Francesca tidbits, some of which is now in a binder that I made for Anne to on different topics of kind of different cheat sheets and reminders for how to accomplish the many myriad different processes that are involved in booking gifts and thanking donors. And some of which, again, I think because Francesca gave me so many tools to work with, and I'm a pack rat, so I kept them. I've been able also to document a few things, and it's not impeccable documentation. It doesn't compare to the policies that you just reviewed, but there's something in the file that people in the future can lean on. And I'm really glad to leave that for people for the future. But I don't mean to be lavish or embarrass you, Francesca, but I really have to say thank you for all the support you gave to me, and it's getting passed on for the future. So those are my remarks. If anyone has questions for
Yes,
me or for
any
Inga.
questions for Mary Jane?
I had one. I noticed your last item was that you or somebody prepared a flyer for recruiting
Fund development. Yeah.
someone
The-
I know you're irreplaceable, but
I'm unique.
someone to try to take over some of the beautiful things that you've done. So how is that going? I mean, how will that?
I took a really bureaucratic sounding and very outdated 2 or 3 page flyer,
Mhm.
and mostly just tried to shorten it and fit it onto one page and give us something that I thought would be people who have experience in the development world, it would make sense to them what our program looks like. And so I know Inga has some good thoughts about listing it or advertising it or exposing it to there's a chapter of the Association of Fundraising Professionals. There's a chapter in Monterey that gets together at Alta for coffee once a month. And so we'll list it with them. They have a job board that they are back to maintaining. They weren't maintaining it a year or so ago. And then we'll just reach out to our personal networks and ask you to do the same thing. It's our personal networks that produced Ann Jacobson and Alana Enton. So,
And Mary Jane Perna.
you produced me, Inga.
So Inga, can you add a little bit more about the recruitment process for the?
Sure. So because this is just a handful of hours, it's PTS, the HR department does not get formally involved. And in fact, I have written instructions that they don't help promote the position, but now we've learned more recently, they could help promote the position. So we'll get that listed with HR, and then we put it on the library's website, and then we'll send it and post it to the AFP job board and open the recruitment and
The time is now
hope
6
to get-
p.m. and the library
hope
is
to get
closed.
candidates.
You're muted, Inga.
Right, somebody in place before I leave is the goal.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Other questions or comments on any part of this report? Francesca, could you see if there's any public input on this item 9? Francesca, are you there?
Sorry, I had my microphone off. To make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand, or if you are connected by phone, dial *9. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Okay, thank you. Any other board comments, questions, discussion? Well, I would, while we've been giving thanks, I know Mary Jane's with us a bit longer and hopefully will be here involved a little bit, at least in the background for quite a while. I just would like to add my compliments to her and my deepest thanks for all the great work she has done for the library and the Friends and Foundation. It has evolved tremendously, I think, in the last year. And obviously this campaign is extremely successful, and you have just been a delight to work with, and you continue to be. So thank you very, very much.
Very much. It's been a privilege. And you'll see me around more when I'm not working rather than less.
Okay, anything else on that item? Well, again, thank you. Moving on then to the informational reports and staff comments. Item number 10 is the financial report. Anything you'd like to highlight on that, Inga?
No, there's nothing that I wanted to highlight, but I'm happy to take questions.
Any trustee questions on the financial report? I just have my usual comment about the amended budget on the revenue side for the library trust fund. I think I see that it has finally been updated. So thank you to Inga and the finance department for finally bringing that back to where it should be. Any other comments or questions? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on item 10, the financial report?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand or dial *9. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Very good, thank you. Moving on then to item 11, the statistical report. Anything you'd like to highlight there, Inga?
Nothing that I was planning to highlight.
Okay, any questions from the trustees on the statistical report? Bob.
Yeah, not a question, but whenever I see charts like this with tons of little tiny numbers, and having taught statistics, I always ask myself, well, what do these numbers mean? You know, and what should they, how could we use them to guide whatever decision making we might make? And so I want to say how much I appreciate and this is not the first meeting where this has been the case, but where we have really a 4-year span of data starting at 2018 and going through March of this year. That really, one thing that the numbers then in that context allow us to do is to look at trends, and taking into account that a couple of those 4 years were very unusual due to the shutdown and the COVID and all of that. But the one thing I want to point out, and maybe like Jim, we have our favorite little pieces of data that we check on each time. But if the second chart that goes from 2018 to 2020, looking at the adult programs, roughly speaking, without using a calculator, the average was about 10 adults per program. Whereas if you look at the last 2 years, even starting in 2020, going until March of this year, far fewer programs, but in fact, there are only about about approximately half as many programs, yet the attendance is still up there. In fact, that means that there are about 20 people per program in the last 2 years, even including the COVID more or less shutdown or reduced program levels that we've been having. And what that tells me is that we have really found a diamond in the rough, or a gem here, for a way to serve the needs of adults, because half as many programs, same number of people, that means twice as many per program. And in fact, if you look at the most recent year, the 2021-22 year, even though there were way less than half as many programs as, say, 2019-2020, before we really hit the pandemic and the shutdowns and everything, even though there were well over twice as many programs, there were actually more adult participants this past year than there was in 2019-2020. So despite the fact there are fewer programs, more participants, and I think we have just really hit on something that needs to be incorporated into how we serve the adult population ongoing, not just while we're still sort of like not using the community room and so forth.
And I would just add that that of course Sarah Nolan has been doing a great job with the programs that she's offered, and Francesca really kicked us off during the pandemic with virtual programming and Zoom programming. But so many of those numbers are due to the outstanding work that Sean Briscoe did for us with the genealogy series that he launched, and the monthly history series that he launched, and then the work that he's been doing on our history slams. There's a student history slam on Saturday, and the following week is an adult history slam. And as I emailed you earlier today, he has found an incredible opportunity up in Oregon, and he's going to be leaving before our next meeting. So it's we hope to keep those numbers up, but it's going to be big shoes to fill, and we don't know, in the next few weeks what we're going to be doing about that. But huge loss.
Since Sean's position is already there, is there any question about being able to find a replacement for him?
Every position as it becomes vacant is scrutinized for whether or not it should be funded or changed and so forth. So I've submitted, earlier today, I submitted the request to open a recruitment. I haven't heard back yet, but given the way the budget is right now, it's going to have to go through a number of hoops before we hear whether or not it's been approved.
Well, I think we have a real strong leg to stand on in saying that the work that this person, Sean, right now has done has allowed us to serve as many, if not more, at least in the adult population, at a much lower cost than if we were having all these programs in person in the community room and so forth. So, it's not just serving the people, but it's saving the city money.
Yeah.
Very good. Other questions? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public input on number 11, the statistical report?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand or dial *9 if connected by phone. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Thank you, Francesca. Any other comments or questions about the statistical report? If not, we can move on. And under informational reports and staff comments, are there any additional verbal comments you'd like to make, Inga?
Nope.
Okay.
Not at this time.
I'm sorry?
Not at this time. No, thank you.
Okay, good. Then moving on to trustee comments, starting with Trustee Petty. Any trustee comments tonight?
Never a dull moment. You're keeping us as busy as we want to be, and I think we're all doing really great work in protecting and innovating what the library is doing for the citizens of Monterey.
Very good. Very good. Trustee Joshi.
I echo what Trustee Perry said. It's a good job. Thank you for doing it.
Well, very good. Thank you. Moving on to Trustee Mora.
I wanted to express kudos to Sarah Nolan for the volunteer breakfast and celebration that she did on Saturday. It was a lovely event, and a lot of volunteers showed up. It was nice to meet them, and Tim Thomas gave his nice hike, and it was lovely. And then I just wanted to share with the trustees, if you hadn't heard, and this has nothing to do with this year's budget, but Pacific Grove Library just eliminated their library fines. And right now, Monterey Public Library is the only library that charges library fines. So this might be something in the future we would talk about. That's it.
Yeah, that was actually included in one of the policies that we recommended be revisited after the approval of a justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging plan.
So that to be continued.
Yeah. Vice Chair Felgen.
Well, I have mixed emotions. I'm sad at the people we're losing, and I'm excited at the possibility of the new people we're going to be taking on. We're facing some challenging times, but it's really heartening that our community is behind us and everybody is working together as a team. I hope we can continue to do so and advocate for our fair share of the budget so we can restaff some of these positions. That's first and foremost in my mind right now. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you. And I'd also like to echo Marcia's comments about the volunteer appreciation picnic. I thought that went very nicely, and appreciate all the staff time and effort that went into that, but even more so appreciate all the great work that the volunteers have done, especially over the last 2 years. And also echo the comments about sadness about the people we're losing, but excitement about opening new doors. And we're certainly working hard at that for the library director recruitment. And I'd also like to thank all my fellow trustees for all the work we're all doing, I think, to try to deal with these difficult challenges, but to move forward in a very exciting way, I think. So with that, if there's nothing else to come before the board, we'll adjourn the meeting to our May meeting. I believe it's almost May already. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.